Dr. Jaishankar, you've been in repeated speeches over the past several years. You've said that geopolitical trends and shifts are on a scale that you've never seen before in all your decades as a diplomat. So looking a little forward, since we're now at the end of this year, coming into the next year, what would be, in your view, the three diplomatic priorities for India and for yourself?
Yes, I have been writing and speaking about the pace of change in the world being quicker. The world is constantly evolving, so in that sense, change is a constant. But clearly, it could be geopolitical, it could be geoeconomic, it could be something like the pandemic. It's like what we saw in terms of the American withdrawal from Afghanistan. Obviously, there's a lot happening which is accelerating the pace of change, if you would. Now, in terms of your question, so what would be our priorities? I think there are two ways of answering that. One way is a kind of a geography way, which is, I would say, obviously for us, the neighborhood and the extended neighborhood. By that I mean the Indian Ocean, ASEAN, Southeast Asia, the Gulf, Central Asia. This is what I would call the extended neighborhood. They would be my number one priority. Number two, of course, would be you could say the big powers, the countries which shape the global order, and having good relations with them so that we are treated well and our interests are recognized and advanced in the global order. And my third priority, of course, would be developing steadily a larger footprint, more relationships, a greater constituency, moving towards a global visibility, you could say, conscious that this would take time. Now, that's one kind of answer I can give you. The other answer I could do, slice it very, very differently in terms of issues rather than geography. I would say, no question about it, for me, my number one priority would be security, national security. In diplomacy, I would put security above all other considerations. If I have to trade something, because security is usually anything you do is often irreversible. The stakes are very high when it comes to security. So, and I know that's not always been our case. Sometimes we've got confused. I mean, you've had situations in the 60s where we didn't put the necessary emphasis on security. The second would be, I would say, economic development or national progress. I think there are a lot of lessons that we could and we should learn, especially from East Asia, from Southeast Asia, countries who have single-mindedly used foreign policy for getting capital, technology, best practices, and being very clear that diplomacy is a process which should serve such a goal, not an end in itself. And here too, I think at times we have not had that focus. I mean, we actually had a period where when you looked at where Indian diplomacy stood in terms of our economic interests and what we could get from the world, they were not focused. I mean, and this was an attitude right at the top. I mean, you actually had prime ministers of the country who thought it was vulgar to discuss business or sort of on visits. I mean, it was simply not done. So I think that's to me clearly a second. And the third, I would say, I would put it as a sort of standing of the country. How do you advance that? How do you get that across strongly? We could call it branding today in a way. But I again lay it out in that order because if I were presented with a choice, which sometimes you are in real life, that would be my order. I mean, if I were to trade off, that is exactly the way I would look at it.
Let's talk about a country that we don't actually focus on, but it's increasingly becoming prominent in the news as far as our relationship is concerned, which is the United Arab Emirates. It'll be the first country, I believe, Prime Minister Modi will visit next year. And it's a country that we've seen increasingly involved in a large number of other things, including this West Asia, quote, quad, unquote. And it's been a heart of a lot of the economic diplomacy that we've been doing. How do you describe the relationship now between us and the United Arab Emirates? And what's driving it?
I would say, first of all, we don't focus on it, we focus on it a lot. In fact, my next engagement is to go for the National Day in the next half an hour. And my next trip abroad, which is on Saturday, is to visit the UAE. So it has been very much one of the focal points, one of our important partners, I would say, especially after 2014. It's a very interesting example, really, because it's a very big energy partner. There's a large Indian expatriate population. There's a lot of offshore finance business which is done there. And yet, if you look at it from the 1980s till 2015, it actually seriously suffered from a want of political attention. If my memory serves me right, before Narendra Modi went to Abu Dhabi, UAE, on a visit, the previous Prime Minister to go was Indira Gandhi. So nobody went, and this, mind you, is one of the key countries of your extended neighborhood. So it tells you a lot, in a way, about the foreign policy, the diplomacy in previous years when you spoke about priorities. And I put those very same criteria which I gave you in the priority answer. It's enormously important for us on national security. It is hugely relevant for us on economic growth in our national development. And the fact that today, it hosts such a large diaspora, and it is in many ways a country which is extremely active in the international scene. It is very vital for us when it comes to branding. So I think it's, in fact, a very good example of the kind of things that have changed in the last few years. The fact that we are far more, in a sense, clear-headed about what our priorities are, who should we be engaging, what should we be getting out of it, what are the outcomes we are looking for. And this is certainly a relationship where I can tell you all the attention that we have invested and they have invested. It has been repaid in very impressive outcomes.